we do what we do. It's we have the other team simulate their cuts, their reads, their tendencies, and the assistants have done an unbelievable job with that. And our scout team has been so dedicated, and they take a lot of pride in what they do. But we can't simulate Kentucky.
That was Bo Ryan just about an hour or so ago addressing the media, talking about Kentucky. This is Mike Hall and Shon Morris here on BTN Live. You know, let's talk about the head coaching matchup here real quick, because it has sort of become fashionable to be like, man, Calipari just brings in guys. He knows how to recruit. He doesn't know how to coach. And then at some point you got to go, well, this is 3 Final Fours in 4 years. He's doing it with different guys every year. There's got to be something there. The flip side being, nobody's ever said Bo Ryan can't coach. It's an interesting head coaching matchup. Very different people there.
Well, it is. And you talk about Kentucky. Let's take a look at that program. We'll start there, Mike. A year ago, they lose in the first round of the NIT to Robert Morris.
Right.
You know, so you lose to one of the founding fathers. No offense, but it's not even in the NCAA tournament.
It wasn't a team. It was a guy they lost to.
A guy.
Bob Morris.
Exactly. Bob Morris, a tremendous individual. But regardless, this is a team that has put it together at the right time. And you watch them throughout the course of the year, Mike, and they look like 5 guys were on the floor at the same time. That's different than playing as a team. And they have played as a team since the opening tip of this NCAA tournament, especially on the defensive end of the floor. They've locked it down, and defense locking it down has been the difference for Wisconsin, that they've been able to put it together. When they struggled during the early to mid part of the Big Ten season, they weren't keeping teams out of the lane. They have done that during this run, and it is going to be imperative that they continue to do it against Kentucky, because sometimes the best offense for Kentucky is a missed shot, particularly when you have Julius Randle.
And you mentioned earlier in the show how impressive Josh Gosser has been on defense. So who does Bo stick him on? Which Kentucky Wildcat does Josh try to slow down?
I think he's going to be drawing some defensive responsibilities on both of the Harrison twins throughout the course of the ball game, and they're going to want to have him also getting in and rebounding the ball. Team rebounding is going to be huge for Wisconsin, and this is where it's going to sound crazy, but this is where a guy like Ben Bruss can make a difference. He's an outstanding guard rebounder, averages about 5 rebounds per ball game. Gosser's given them about 5 or 6 rebounds per ball game in the NCAA tournament. They are going to need every one of those, because every time the ball goes up, Randall thinks that ball is rightfully his, and that was a big difference in their win, along with Lee that came in off the bench for the Wildcats and the offensive rebounding. If they can limit Kentucky to one shot and kind of frustrate them, you may have to see Wisconsin maybe kind of back off the offensive firepower in terms of getting up and down the floor, and maybe play the more stereotypical Wisconsin way to give themselves a chance.
Yeah, it's funny though. You mentioned guards. We mentioned Brust. We mentioned Gosser. I can't help but look at the Michigan game that Kentucky just won and worry about points in the paint, worry about rebound, worry about the bigs. Does Wisconsin have what they need to do to slow down? You're not going to stop them, but what will be the strategy to try to slow down all that production Kentucky had from their big guys?
I think the way that they're going to try to slow down the Kentucky Wildcats, Mike, is not. It's going to sound counterintuitive, but bear with me here if you can for a second. It's going to be what they did to Baylor. They slowed them down on the offensive end of the floor, not necessarily the defensive end of the floor, because this is a team in Kentucky that wants to get out and run. They want to make the spectacular play. And Wisconsin will spread you out and force you to exert energy on that end of the floor. I think that that's going to be the strategy that they try to employ, is force Kentucky to exert so much energy on that end of the floor that their willingness and ability to get out and run consistently, particularly if a guy like Cauley Stein isn't unavailable to them, that will be where they really force Kentucky to play at a level at which they're not comfortable, is going to be when they're on defense rather than they're on offense. Certainly taking points out of the paint is going to be a key for them, but they're going to need to really force Kentucky to exert energy and discipline on the defensive end.
We'll see if that can happen. Frank Kaminsky's role in that game, will he try to stretch them out, or will they try to feed him inside?
You know, I think they're going to try to do both, but where he is going to be able to have an impact on that offensive end of the floor, kind of speaking to my earlier point, is if he can pull a guy like Randall away from the rim. If he can knock down an early three and force Randall to come out of there, you've negated a lot of what Randall gives Kentucky, and that's once that ball goes up on the backboard on either end of the floor. And watch for them to isolate Nigel Hayes against Nigel Hayes is a guy that, although he's a freshman, he's a different type of freshman than Kentucky Kentucky has. He may not have, necessarily the physical attributes, but his basketball savvy is uncanny. They will isolate one side of the floor and let him operate. It'll be very interesting to see how Kentucky defends him.
Yeah, being a freshman doesn't really matter in this game. That seems to be okay. Your age doesn't necessarily apply when you're playing Kentucky.